Despite being the most important contact point between you and your bike, it's surprising how many people persist with an uncomfortable saddle. In part, this is due to the wide array of options available and people not knowing where to start. So here it is, our buyer's guide to saddles. So let's have a look at the key sections of a saddle and see what might work for your riding style. First off, we'll look at the rails, which form the frame on the underside of the saddle. Rails are a prime example of where the price can be relatively cheap to really high. Generally, the lighter the rails, the more expensive they are. Also, it's worth noting that if you have titanium or carbon rails, they'll be a bit more comfortable than a firm, rigid steel or manganese chrome alloy. Most saddles and bikes conform to the same standard, so you can be confident if you buy a saddle, it will fit your bike and vice versa. An exception to this is if you buy a carbon saddle. Most saddles with the carbon rail have an oval shape. This means to use this on your bike, you'll need to have a vertical seat clamp. A common misconception is that the more padding a saddle has, the more comfortable it will be. Now, in some instances, this is true. For example, the fabric sail was designed for the more leisurely cyclist and has a lot of cushioning. However, professional cyclists who are often riding for between 6 and 7 hours a day will often ride a carbon saddle with a very thin synthetic leather, like this Italia SLR Technoflow. You may be wondering why more padding doesn't mean more comfort. If you're riding for a long time on a heavily cushioned saddle, effectively the padding becomes a bit deformed and this can cause pinch points for some riders. So, although you can have too much padding, can you have not enough padding? Some riders, I've said with the Pro Peloton, will ride very minimalist saddles, some with just carbon. This works for some people, but in reality it's finding a compromise on what works for you. Choosing the correct shaped saddle is often the crux of where saddle issues and confusion start. A lot of brands now offer a wide variety of shapes of saddle to almost accommodate every different riding style, so it can be quite confusing on what's likely to be the best one for you. Generally speaking, the more upright riding position you have, you'll have a more curved and cushioned saddle. If you tend to ride a more forward and aggressive position and maybe have a flat back when you ride, often you'll find a flat, narrow saddle to be more preferable. We've had a quick look at the shape of saddle which might be appropriate for your riding style. The next thing to consider is what size of saddle is best for your body shape. More and more brands have now saddle fit systems in which they measure your sit bone width. Generally speaking, you choose a saddle which is 2 centimeters wider than your sit bone width. If you're not fortunate enough to go to a bike shop or use a brand's sit bone width measurement systems, one thing you could try, which I have, is place some foil on your stairs, sit down on that and then stand up and measure the distance between the indentations. Now that you've measured your sit bones, you've got the right size of saddle, you're comfortable that you've got the correct shape, so if you're an aggressive rider again, probably flat and narrow, and you're riding and you're still getting discomfort, one thing for you to try might be a cutout saddle. So on the table here we've got quite a variety of cutout saddles, from the Italia saddle I showed earlier where the cutout starts right at the rear of the saddle all the way to the front. A Specialized Roman Evo, which is a slightly smaller cutout, but again there's a bit of a relief channel at the front. And at the time, the groundbreaking Arte Adamo saddle, where you'll see it's a bit of a strange looking saddle, but again there's a cutout right down the middle and the nose is split. The theory behind a cutout saddle is it should increase the blood flow to your important regions and hopefully prevent any numbness. One question is, if you don't actually need a cutout saddle and you're using one, are there any negatives? Well, a lot of people do this and are completely fine, although a small number of people sometimes do find pinching to be a problem. An alternative to a standard cutaway saddle is one with a relief channel. You should still get the increased blood flow, however there's also a cover which should mean you don't get soaked from spray from the road. The best way to find out whether you'll benefit from a cutout saddle is simply to give it a try. Many bike shops allow you to borrow a saddle, so this might be the best way forward before splashing the cash.